Well, I'll sit here, you sit over there.
Good.
And somebody will keep the time, right? So I got thing this time. Henk, before we start, anybody seen this magazine? This is IT Pro magazine, and I think every issue they will introduce an IT leader in Hong Kong. So this shows Henk proudly beside the Aegis brand. And then inside, he is holding the iPad, which is the ones that house his award-winning applications. Right, so I think that's a good lead-in. Maybe Henk, you can tell us something about this award that you won. What was it all about?
Now, fortunately, Jason already introduced it in his presentation. I don't think I need to explain exactly what we did. It's part of our front-end strategy. In our company, we sat down, I think about 3.5, 4 years ago, and we thought about how can we better serve our agents, or what should we do in the future, looking at the tools that we gifted them to help them to sell our products. Traditionally, our company has already had a long history of providing applications to our agents. I joined 5 years ago, and I think at least 10, 11, 12 years ago, there was already a platform at that point in time on very old technology, I think HP iPacs or whatsoever, that already contained quite a comprehensive set of functions that our agents could use in the field. Obviously, our agents need to be in the field, in Hong Kong, talking to customers, trying to sell our products. So they are by nature mobile. So 10, 11 years ago, there was already a platform on old technology available. But at that point in time, I think just like probably the experience of a lot of you, those kinds of applications really were, I call it a technology push, usually developed by IT, looking at technology, not about usability or whatsoever. And hence, as a result, the applications were used, but were not extremely successful. So we sat down about 4 years ago when we thought, okay, what can we do in order to make those applications really successful and used by our agents? And I think we were at the right moment in time. When I came here in Hong Kong 4 or 5 years ago, when I went into the MTR, everybody was carrying an iPhone, or a little bit later, iPads came about, and they were they were devices that everybody wanted to have. So for the first time, we saw that there was really a demand of users of our agents for applications on these kinds of devices. So at that point in time, we developed a strategy. I think just like what every company does, what most of you probably have done, the first application that we developed on an iPhone was something where our CEO said, our competitor has this, I want to have it as well, can you make sure that you have this in 3 months' time? So we basically went on that journey, but we really thought about, let's say, how can we extend that into a proper strategy that will ensure that our agents will eventually be able to do most of the things on their mobile device. And one of the key things that we were able to develop is because, let's say, one of our staff had a great idea about how to do proper financial need analysis, indeed, like Jason shared, storytelling based, where they really felt that that would be the right way for our agents to really engage with the customers. We were fortunate enough to find a company like Cherrypix to help us in translating that vision into something that was also implementable and usable on a iPad. And indeed, we developed it, I think, in 1.5 years' time, introduced it into the market. Our agents were very enthusiastic, as you can judge by the figures that Jason shared. And since that was a very unique approach for financial need analysis in the market, it was recognized by Hong Kong because we won an ICT award here, I think 2 years ago. Last year we got a Merit Award, a Merit Picta Award, and recently, let's say, Celent, one of the analyst companies, classified our application as, let's say, the best practice in terms of financial need analysis in the market.
Mm-hmm. Well, by winning the awards, certainly the judges has very good view of the usefulness and of this particular development. But how do you see why does the agents and the customer like this application? What's the critical success factor?
Well, I'm obviously not an agent. I'm just an IT guy. But based on what I see and the feedback that the team gives is that having such an application which is very visual, to a certain extent entertaining. I think Jason, you used the word game. It's not a game, but it's very visual, it's very entertaining. It provides the agent with an opportunity to really engage with a customer in the pre-sales process. So you can take the application, you can sit next to the customer, you can basically walk him through the financial need analysis process. You could even give the iPad to the customer and let him play for himself. So it's a very non-intrusive way of having the discussion about gaps in your financial needs, eventually leading into product recommendations, that I think is very natural and very engaging and to a certain extent fun for a customer to do. Like in one of the slides of Jason, traditionally, let's say, these types of processes are very boring Q&A sessions where customers don't want to already provide a lot of this type of information at the early stages of the sales process. And it's also a very boring process, both for the customer as well as for the agent. It's very tedious. Doing it with this application in a very visual way, in a very gradual way, make sure that, let's say, the agent can really engage with the customer. So that's, I think, one of the critical success factors of this application.
Mm-hmm. In the magazine, you mentioned about 4 areas that I think is essential to your business. One is mobile, one is cloud computing, one is social media, and one is big data. Which one you think is the ones that has most potential going forward? Or where do you want to invest your money?
I think potential is difficult. Unfortunately, just like everybody, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know eventually which of the technologies will be most helping us in continuing and improving our business. Mm-hmm. So far, out of the 4, I think definitely mobile has been the most helpful, also because that's a very natural way to support our business. For big data, same as I think Sukwa from Lockton mentioned this morning in the panel, my standpoint is that there is still so much internal data that we can further leverage in improving our business that I don't really believe in the big data concept for a lot of insurance companies yet. To a certain extent, my standpoint is that it's still a little bit overhyped, but maybe we'll hear this afternoon, let's say, whether or not that's really the case, yes or no.
Well, told us to convince us.
Indeed, it might be very insightful, but let's say we still have a lot of customer data and agency data that we don't use yet or not to the full potential, and I think that's the case for a lot of traditional insurance companies. Social is a tricky one. We have adopted social media, things like Facebook, YouTube, and whatsoever, in our marketing team in a very traditional way. We use it very extensively as an additional marketing channel. But to really go the step beyond that, to really use social media to engage with customers or to, for instance, enable our agents to engage with customers is a bit of a tricky one, and that's because of regulations and compliance. We need to be very careful what we enable our agents to do, because to a certain extent we are liable for what they do and what they tell their customers. So to give them full freedom in, let's say, using social media to engage and share information is something that we closely need to monitor. I personally don't believe in the near future that social media will become a distribution platform for insurance products. So that's where I see social media still see it in a very traditional way. And cloud, just like said this morning as well by some people, has almost already become one of the, I would call it, preferred ways to deploy solutions. But definitely a cloud-based solution should be in any selection of a new solution, whether it's the infrastructure application, when you're looking at something new. So I would not even call that innovative anymore.
Yeah. This morning we talked about a lot of things about data, about technology. From your standpoint, what technology you think will be the game changer for the insurance industry? Change the rule of the game, how we operate?
That's a very difficult one, because then we first have to have a discussion about what a game changer is. Indeed, is it something that radically changes the insurance industry? I don't know whether that exists. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I think there are a lot of developments, very interesting developments. There's currently a discussion about other big global players entering the insurance industry. I think Google has some thoughts. I think looking at insurance banking in China, Alibaba has set up a partnership with Taiping, if I'm not mistaken. Will those technology giants, for instance, have certain advantages that will radically change the way we do classic insurance? I don't know. Could be. But to a certain extent, I think that will be limited. If you look at banks and insurance company, it's still a lot about trust.
True.
If you park your money with a company who has only been around for 10 years, then I would challenge, let's say, whether or not that's a good idea at this point in time. So I see personally those kinds of developments more in the context of establishments of new distribution channels, using the knowledge, for instance, the data that Google have in a good way, as maybe an additional distribution channel to sell insurance. But the core competency of banks and insurance companies, I don't know whether there's a technology that will indeed eventually be the game changer that will change our industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing we heard in the panel just now is some self-service is progressing, but for a lot of insurance products, still the customer prefer to talk to an agent, understand the structure of the products and what happens if I do this, do that. So that is an evolutionary path. So we're probably not looking at something that is completely revolutionary. Like the bankers always thinking, hey, we can close all our branches and let the customer do all the work. The answer is no, not yet. And probably even more so in the insurance industry. How about privacy, data privacy? Very sensitive subject.
Yeah, extremely important. I think the topic about personal data privacy ordinance here in Hong Kong already came up a few times this morning in the discussions. It's an extremely sensitive subject. On one hand, you would like to start using a lot of customer information that you have. And if you look at, let's say, where you start to capture those data, indeed, it happens these days on mobile devices, so outside of the sort of like corporate boundaries. And there is an expectation, especially if you want to be seen as indeed a trusted company, that you need to manage that information in a very controlled and effective way. So that's where I think, as part of the development, you always will have to take security and data privacy into account, partly because it's a regulated, we're working in a regulated environment, so we need to be compliant against these ordinances and other regulations. So I think you need to embed that in your end-to-end process to make sure that if you deal with customer data, that you know how to protect that you know where you can and can't use it. And as long as you do that in a diligent and controlled way, I think there is no boundary or any limit in, let's say, the new technologies and the new solutions that you can deploy.
Usually technology is not the issue, it's people is the issue. So in your organization, Aegis, how do you make sure that you do have this data protection culture built into both in the minds of the IT guys and also the agents? Is there a particular...
I think in a very classic way, we have security awareness training as part of onboarding of new staff. Mm-hmm. We have an extensive set of information security related policies where indeed data privacy is an element of it, so people are continuously trained. We reinforce communication. We have policies for our developers if new solutions are being built. But it's a continuous process. You need to train new people. You need to make sure that existing people are continuously kept aware of, let's say, what they need to comply to and what they need to follow.
True. Okay.
That's part of our complete organization.
The last thing is to do a bit of crystal ball gazing. Looking down the road 5 years from now, how do you see the insurance industry shaping up more from the technology and innovation standpoint? Are we still doing the same thing over and over again, but more technology, or you see some fundamental changes coming down the road?
I think we are a relatively conservative industry. So if you talk about 5 years ago, definitely we'll be in a better position looking at leveraging all these new technologies. But I don't believe that in 5 years, especially not with, let's say, the immense focus on regulations and compliance. If you look at our company, I think we spent at least half of the budget this year on, I call them non-value-added projects, regulations. And it makes it very difficult to really spend sufficient time on all the other opportunities that we have. And I think that will continue in the coming years. So in 5 years, I don't see a revolution. What I still hope is that by the time I retire, and I've got still many, many more years to go, that we'll finally be in a situation where we have been able to digitalize most of our processes. I think we and a lot of the people here probably are working in a business where we still do a lot of things on paper, manual, tedious, with a lot of manpower, where currently the technology, in my opinion, is already there. We should eventually be in a stage where indeed our agents or whatever kind of distribution channel you use, they indeed work digitally on a mobile device. We don't have any issues or discussions about electronic signatures anymore or paperwork that needs to be produced. Hence, for instance, requires a discussion with the regulator as well to validate that indeed those kinds of technologies and working paperless are accepted. We should be able to go straight through with things like predictive analytics, expert automated underwriting systems. Eventually, we should be able to issue policies online, electronically, on maybe mobile devices or via whatever kind of channels we will have. But that's a path that we need to follow where indeed, step by step, I think you need to try to embed those kinds of new technologies and new options into the projects that you do, either as part of introducing or supporting a new regulation, either as part of improving your business process. And then maybe if we do that consistently, so I'm more into sort of like a gradual change process still instead of doing things in a disruptive way.
Yes.
So I don't believe that a lot of insurance companies are able to do things really in a disruptive way, change things overnight, either because of legacy or because of regulations. So maybe then in not 5 years' time, but by the time I retire, let's say, we'll be in a situation where things are much better.
Thank you. And one last question I have is, you have been in Hong Kong for 5 years now, and previously you worked in Malaysia and also in Netherlands. How do you see the insurance business? How is it different between Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Netherlands in terms of the deployment of technology, innovation?
Well, this is probably not a nice comment for Hong Kong, but when I came into Hong Kong 5 years ago and I looked at insurance companies, I thought they were a little bit behind if you look at, let's say, implementing innovative technologies and straight-through processing for various reasons. 10 years ago, let's say, in the Netherlands, and it's obviously a different environment, I was already working in an insurance company where we indeed implemented a straight-through process from, at that point in time, offline quotation software all the way through into the back-end system, where in the company I joined, let's say, there was still a very tedious manual process. So I think to a certain extent, at that point in time, there was still a lot of things to do in Hong Kong, but Hong Kong is catching up quite rapidly. Same as with regulation. In the past 4 or 5 years, regulations have changed significantly. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. I think we're catching up, but I think there's still a lot of work to do.
In China?
I have no idea.
Not yet?
No. We currently only focus on Hong Kong business.
Okay. And question from the audience?
Congratulations, Henk, for the award. My question to you is, like, with such success in ages, how has the conversation with your business users changed? Are the conversations heading to how do we leverage such new technologies for innovation or for efficiency improvements internally?
I don't think that the discussions in our company have radically changed. Let's say I frequently have discussions or debates with either analysts or vendors about very classic insurance companies where people work in silos and people have different titles and roles and they don't really communicate effectively. Maybe we're fortunate, but we're working in a company where on each level people work closely together, and especially in a context where you always need to set your priorities properly. You need to balance where you spend your money and you spend your time. And hence, in the past and also now, we try to make conscious decisions whether or not indeed, and obviously the market and the competition to a certain extent drives those discussions, but whether or not we give priority to things that improve efficiency or improve sales or etc. And it's always trying to find the right balance. And sometimes, depending on circumstances, we need to spend a little bit more time and effort on the commercial side. But everybody knows, unfortunately, we have senior management that is aware of that as well. You can't then delay focusing on operational efficiencies too long. So we try to balance and to find the right mix of projects and the right allocation on budget on a year-by-year basis. And that's where I think it was part of the presentation this morning as well, that's where agility comes in, not so much in agility in development, but the agility in continuously re-evaluating your strategy, changing then the priorities and the projects accordingly.
Earlier, Dr. Cham talked about the potential of big data, and you just mentioned that, well, we have lots of internal data that are not yet to be utilized to its full potential. So my question to you is, what is your biggest challenge in terms of utilizing your existing internal data to its best potential?
It might be very particular to the way we are organized and the business model that we use. We predominantly work via agents and brokers, and for this discussion, let's focus on the agency business. In my personal opinion, let's say one of the biggest challenges is to make sure that we build up the data together with our agents, and then help our agents in an effective way to make sure that they have the ability to improve their sales capacity. Currently, we as an insurance company have a lot of data. I think it was said this morning as well, regulators are these days extremely sensitive about exactly what data we capture from the customer, and it needs to be fit for purpose, so we can't ask a lot of additional information that we don't necessarily need in order to fulfill our duty as an insurance company. Our agents have a lot of data about customer, but they usually consider that as their data. There is a lot of data of customers out there that neither we nor the agent know of, that maybe customers don't want to share with us yet, or they are not sharing yet. So I think one of the biggest challenges is to bring all those three worlds together, to make sure that people trust each other to provide that data and to use that in a secure and convenient way. And I think once you then build up that comprehensive full data set, then I think you've got a lot of information and that you can then use, hopefully in a compliant and customer-oriented way, to provide the customer with, let's say, the right solutions that depending on their needs. I think there are a lot of areas before you can reach that end state that still need to be covered. And that's partly on the technology side, partly on the trust, the people side.
Trust.
And it requires also changes in process.
Thank you very much.
So even though you got the data, you might not be able to fully utilize the potential, the power of those data. Any other questions for Henk?
You mentioned earlier when you first arrived 5 years ago, very manual processes, a lot of hard work, and obviously you've gone through a huge change to get that. And as we know, people resist change. The best laid plans can still go awry. So you've obviously done a lot of change in internal thinking. What would be sort of keys to make that happen? So you can have a great plan, but getting everybody on board and going in the same direction, I think, is one of the big challenges to create the change from hard paper to technology. What are some of the keys to make that work?
I think a combination of things. You obviously have to have a consistent strategy, so you need to make sure. I honestly believe that things like business ICT alignment is a very important thing. So you need to make sure that you continuously follow your business strategy, the changes in your business strategy, and then align your IT strategy and initiatives accordingly. I think it's finding on the people side a way to demonstrate that there are benefits, not only for the organization, also for the people. And obviously in our context, that means especially for agents, we need to demonstrate that there is added value in what we want to do and what we provide to them. So I think it's a combination of things.
Good point. One more question. That's your last chance.
I think everybody's hungry.
Okay. Good.
So the app that you develop is very good in terms of capturing data and so on. What would you think is the barrier to entry for another competitor like Prudential, AIA to have develop the similar app?
I don't think it's the app itself. Because you've seen the screenshots, you know what it looks like. But it's obvious that's indeed probably not the crux. Now it is also in our company. We now have the tool, but we need to spend continuous time and effort in training, educating our agents. And as you know, let's say in the agency market here in Hong Kong, there's an enormous turnover. We have 2,600 agents now, I think. Let's say every year, let's say about 1,000 leave, and we need to recruit another 1,000. So we spend a significant amount of time, or the business team spend a significant amount of time on training up the agents, providing education, making sure that they use the application, look at the statistics to ensure that it's being used, to follow up, to embed it, let's say, in, let's say, the training on sales approach, and probably looking at our app is definitely focusing on helping our agents to engage with customers and to generate sales. But another important aspect is to make sure that we are compliant. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of focus of the regulator these days on making sure that you give the best or a good advice to customers. So don't do product push or don't mis-sell just because agents want to earn commission. But that's where we feel this tool is also extremely important. If our agents are able to go with the customer through a proper gap analysis, and eventually the product that they recommend is indeed in line with the gap, and we can also ensure that we have compliant-based sales. And our agents are being trained for that. So I think to make sure that, let's say, you're as successful as a company as what we have done, it's not so much the app and the technology. It's everything around it and making sure that this becomes a standard part of the sales practice and the way that agents basically engage with our customers.
Okay. I think we're all hungry. I would like to thank Henk for an excellent interview.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.